My name was William Carter, but everyone called me Will. If you're hearing this story, it's because they finally discovered what I left behind for them. For 52 years, I lived a life that swung between contempt and success, between true love and the cruelest betrayal. And in the end, when death knocked on my door, I managed to do something I should have done long ago: give each one exactly what they deserved. I was born in Austin, Texas, into the respectable Carter family. My father, Mark Carter, was an influential lawyer with an office on Congress Avenue, and my mother, Margaret, dedicated her time to high society charity work. We were a family of tradition, old money, and high expectations. My two older brothers, James and Richard, were always the pride of my parents. James followed in our father's footsteps at Harvard Law School, while Richard went to Yale and became a successful real estate entrepreneur. I, on the other hand, was the black sheep. Since I was little, I preferred being in the stables on our property taking care of the horses rather than studying Latin or practicing social etiquette. While my brothers wore suits and attended exclusive clubs, I walked around in muddy boots and flannel shirts. "William will never amount to anything," my mother used to say to her friends during afternoon tea. "He's a dreamer who smells like manure," my father would add, shaking his head in disappointment. The comparisons were constant. At the dinner table, I would hear about James's academic achievements, about Richard's prosperous business ventures, about how they were worthy of the Carter name. Me? I was tolerated, like a distant relative who insisted on showing up to family gatherings. At 18, when I announced that I wasn't going to college and wanted to work with cattle, the disappointment in my parents' eyes was palpable. "You're wasting your life, William," my father said that night. "The Carters are lawyers, respected businessmen. We are not ranchers." But I had a plan. My paternal grandmother, Dorothy Carter, had left me a small rural property on the outskirts of Austin when she died. It was just an old house and a few hundred acres, but to me, it was the beginning of something big. Against the family's wishes, I moved there at 20 and started raising cattle with the little money I had. The first few years were tough. I worked from before sunrise to well after sunset, learning everything about livestock, commodity markets, and ranch management. While my brothers were attending countryside parties, I was studying cattle bloodlines and market trends. My family rarely visited me, and when they did, it was always with condescending remarks about my rebellious phase. At 30, something extraordinary happened. All the hard work, all the dedication, and especially my business vision started to pay off. Carter Ranch had expanded to 5,000 acres, and I had developed a genetic improvement program that produced superior quality beef. Contracts with major meat packers started pouring in, and suddenly the problem child was making more money than the entire family combined. The shift in my family's attitude was almost comical. Overnight, James began stopping by to visit his brother. Richard suddenly discovered he had always been interested in livestock. My mother started referring to me as my son, the successful rural entrepreneur. Weekly visits became a routine, always accompanied by suggestions on how I could diversify my investments or expand into other states. In 5 years, Carter Ranch became one of the largest cattle operations in Texas, and I became a multimillionaire. Funny how money can change people's perception of you, isn't it? Suddenly, my simplicity was seen as rustic charm, and my passion for the land was a connection to his roots. But I wasn't naive. I knew exactly what had changed their opinion of me.
Despite all the wealth I had earned, I kept my simple essence. I still wore the same worn-out boots, drove my old Ford pickup, and preferred backyard barbecues over fancy Austin restaurants. It was exactly that simplicity that led me to meet Regina Garcia, and with her, discover what it really meant to be loved. Regina arrived at Carter Ranch on a spring morning in 2011. She was 25, the daughter of Mexican immigrants, and had a degree in farm management from the University of Texas. When my previous manager retired, I was looking for someone to handle the farm's administrative side. Regina not only had the technical qualifications, but she also knew cattle, spoke fluent Spanish to communicate with many of the workers, and had a practical intelligence that impressed me from day one. She was different from every woman I had ever met. She wasn't impressed by my money, nor did she try to charm me by talking about things she didn't understand. Regina knew every aspect of the farm's operations, suggested real improvements, and treated both the workers and the investors with the same respect. She was beautiful, of course, with long black hair and expressive brown eyes, but it was her intelligence and character that truly drew me in. For months, our relationship remained strictly professional. She called me Mr. Carter, always kept a respectful distance, and I did my best not to show the growing interest I had in her. Until one day, during a heavy storm that kept us trapped in the ranch office late into the night, we began talking about our lives, our dreams, our frustrations. "You know, Mr. Carter," she said that night, watching the rain hit the window, "sometimes I wonder if people see me as Regina or just the Mexican girl who works on the ranch. To me, you've always been Regina, the smartest and most capable woman I have ever met." That was the moment I realized how much she meant to me. It wasn't just physical attraction or professional admiration. It was something deeper, a connection I had never felt with anyone before. We began dating discreetly. Regina feared the other employees might think she was trying to take advantage of the situation, and I respected her concern. Our dates were simple: horseback rides through the fields at sunset, dinners on the farmhouse porch, or watching the sunset sitting on the fence by the pasture. She showed me a side of life I had forgotten existed, the beauty of simple things, the importance of being present in the moment, the value of being loved for who you are and not for what you have. My family, of course, didn't take the news of our relationship well when I finally told them. Their reaction was immediate and predictable. "William, are you sure about this?" my mother asked during a family dinner. She's very different from us." "Different how?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Well, she's Mexican, dear," my mother said, as if that explained everything. James was more direct. "Bro, date whoever you want, but marriage? Come on. You built an empire. You need to protect your interests." Richard agreed. "There are women from our social class, Will. Women who'd understand our lifestyle better, our family." But I was truly in love for the first time in my life. Regina loved me for who I was when I was covered in dirt working in the pens, when I woke up in the middle of the night to help a cow give birth, when I spent hours going over the ranch's expansion plans. She never asked for expensive jewelry or luxury trips. Her happiness came from small things: a flower I picked for her in the field, a book we bought together in town, a quiet night watching TV cuddled on the couch. In December 2012, I proposed to Regina. It was during one of our sunset rides, in a special spot on the ranch where we always went to watch the sun go down. She cried when she said yes, and I knew I had found my soulmate. "It's going to be the most beautiful family in the world," she said that night, hugging me on the porch. "Our kids will grow up knowing both American and Mexican culture. They'll learn to love the land just like you taught me." 2 months later, Regina found out she was pregnant. The happiness was indescribable. I was finally going to have the family I had always dreamed of, a family built on true love, not on appearances or financial interest. We started planning the wedding for May, and I could already picture our child running through the fields of Carter Ranch. But my family stepped up the pressure. Their visits became more frequent, always with subtle remarks about Regina. "Is she sure the baby is yours, William?" James asked one day, pretending to be concerned. "What kind of question is that?" I replied, outraged. "It's just that, well, she's been working here a long time, knows a lot of the staff, and you two only started dating recently," Richard insinuated. "You're being ridiculous," I said, but the seed of doubt had been planted.
In the weeks that followed, my brothers continued with their venomous comments. They talked about paternity fraud cases, about women who tricked rich men, about the importance of protecting oneself legally. My mother would subtly suggest I get a DNA test done, just to be sure. 2 weeks before the wedding, my world collapsed. It was a Thursday afternoon when I decided to go to the barn to retrieve some documents I had forgotten there. As I approached, I heard voices inside. One of them was unmistakably Regina's. The other belonged to a man I didn't recognize at first. When I opened the barn door, the scene I saw shattered me. Regina was in another man's arms, kissing him passionately. They immediately pulled away when they saw me, and Regina went pale. "Well, I can explain," she stammered. Her voice slurred. It sounded like she'd been drinking. But I was already walking away. The man was Leon Castillo, an accountant my family had recently hired to help with some financial matters on the ranch. Young, handsome, and apparently Regina's true love. That night, I ended our relationship. Regina tried to explain, said she could clarify everything, but I was too devastated to listen. The betrayal in the barn had confirmed every fear my family had planted in me. "I want a DNA test as soon as the baby is born," I said coldly. "And I want you off the ranch immediately." "Well, please let me explain what you saw," Regina pleaded, tears in her eyes. "There's nothing to explain. I saw enough." The DNA test was conducted as soon as Miguel was born. The result was crushing. 99.7% probability that I was not the biological father. Regina, with no means to contest the result and devastated by the situation, accepted a small sum of money and moved to San Antonio with the baby. My family was supportive throughout the entire process. "Good thing you found out in time, William. Can you imagine marrying that gold digger?" "You did the right thing, bro. You can't let opportunists destroy everything you've built. Now you can find someone from our social class, someone who truly deserves you." In the years that followed, they continued being my loving family, always showing up when they needed money for their own ventures, always with new projects I should invest in. And I, bitter and wounded, never had a serious relationship again. I devoted myself entirely to work, expanding Carter Ranch into other states, becoming even richer, but also more alone. Sometimes, late at night, I'd thought about Regina and Miguel. I'd hear about them occasionally. She had gotten a job at an accounting office in San Antonio and was raising the boy on her own. Part of me felt a sting of guilt, but I always pushed those thoughts aside, clinging to the memory of the betrayal I had witnessed. At 52, during a routine medical checkup, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The news was devastating. Stage 4, extremely aggressive, with a prognosis of no more than 3 months to live. The doctor was blunt. There was no treatment that could save me, only palliative care to make my final days more comfortable. Word of my illness spread quickly. My family was genuinely shaken, but I could also see a poorly concealed anxiety in their eyes. After all, I was single, had no acknowledged children, and owned a fortune estimated at over $200 million. During my final weeks in the hospital, something happened that changed everything. A nurse named Leah Hurt, who had worked at the DNA lab where Miguel's test had been processed 12 years earlier, came to see me. She was visibly nervous and said she had something on her conscience that she'd been carrying for years. "Mr. Carter," she said, her hands trembling, "I heard that you're sick, and I need to tell you the truth about that DNA test from 2013. At first, I thought she was about to confess some technical error, but what she told me was far worse than any mistake. "Your brothers came to me 2 weeks before the test," she admitted, crying. "They offered me $50,000 to switch the samples. I was going through financial hardship. My daughter needed an expensive surgery, and I did the wrong thing. The world seemed to stop around me." "What are you saying?" "The boy is your son, Mr. Carter. The original test showed a 99.9% probability of paternity. Your brothers paid me to replace your sample with someone else's." "And the betrayal? I saw Regina in another man's arms." Regina lowered her head, ashamed. "They told me about that too. They said they spiked her drink. Leon Castile was an actor they hired. Regina was confused, didn't know where she was or what was happening. They brought her to the barn and staged the whole scene, knowing you'd show up at that exact moment." The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. For 12 years, I had hated the woman I loved most in this world and rejected my own son, all because of the greed and prejudice of my own family. Regina had never betrayed me. Miguel had always been my son, and I had destroyed all our lives by believing the lies my brothers fed me. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, still in shock. "Because I can't live with the guilt anymore," she sobbed, "and because I heard you're dying. I thought you deserved to know the truth before you go." That very night, I instructed my lawyer to find Regina and Miguel. We discovered that she still lived in San Antonio, working as a financial manager for a small company, and Miguel, now 12, was a bright kid, an excellent student, and passionate about horses, just like I was at his age. With my last bit of strength, I traveled to San Antonio. When Regina opened her front door and saw me, the shock in her eyes was unmistakable. I was visibly ill, thin from chemotherapy, but determined to fix the greatest mistake of my life. "Regina," I began, my voice shaky, "I found out the truth. I told you everything about the bribe, the falsified test, the staged barn scene." I watched the tears run down her face as she realized I finally knew what she had tried to explain to me 12 years earlier. "I tried to tell you that night. I tried to explain that I didn't know how I ended up in that barn, that I didn't remember anything after the party, but you didn't want to hear it." "I know, and I hate myself for it," I replied, dropping to my knees before her. "Regina, can you ever forgive me for what I did to you and our son?" Miguel, who was watching from the top of the stairs, slowly came down. It was like looking into a mirror from the past. He had my eyes, my bone structure, even my walk. "Is that my dad?" he asked Regina. "Yes, sweetheart, that's your dad." In the final days of my life, I finally met my son. Miguel was everything I could have dreamed of. Smart, curious, kind, like his mother, but with my determination and love for nature. In our brief time together,
He told me about his dreams of having a ranch, raising horses, meeting the father he had only heard about but never known. Regina, with the same generosity she had always shown, forgave me. I always knew deep down you were a good man, Will. Your family poisoned your mind, but not your heart. I died in peace, knowing I had asked for forgiveness and that Regina and Miguel would finally know the truth. But I had one last surprise prepared for my dear family. In my final days, I instructed my lawyer on how to proceed with my will. I also hired a private investigator to gather all the evidence of what my brothers had done. Payment receipts to Leah Hurt, contracts with actor Leon Castillo, bank transaction records, everything. The day of the will reading arrived. My family was anxious, dressed in mourning, but with a gleam of expectation in their eyes. James had even brought his wife and kids, probably imagining they were about to inherit an empire. To everyone's surprise, Regina and Miguel were present in the room. "Why are they here?" Richard asked, clearly irritated. "It was a direct request from Mr. Carter," explained my lawyer, Thomas Wilson. Then a large screen was set up in the room and my video began to play. I appeared on screen, visibly ill, but with determined eyes. If you're watching this, it's because I've left this world. But before I go, I need to share a truth I uncovered in my final days. I saw the discomfort grow on my brothers' faces as I continued. Leah Hurt, a nurse who worked at the DNA lab 12 years ago, came to see me when she heard I was dying. What she revealed made me realize I had lived a lie for over a decade. The camera captured the rising tension in the room. James and Richard, my dear brothers, paid $50,000 to Leah Hurt to falsify my son's DNA test. They couldn't stand the idea of me marrying a Mexican woman and potentially sharing the Carter family inheritance. My mother turned pale, and I saw James and Richard glance at each other nervously. The man Regina was hugging in the barn, an actor named Leon Castillo, hired by you. You drugged Regina's drink at a party and staged the entire betrayal, knowing exactly when I would walk into that barn. Regina began to cry silently, and Miguel held her hand. I also discovered that Miguel Carter Garcia is truly my son, my blood, my rightful heir. I spent 12 years hating the woman I loved most and rejecting my own son because of my family's greed and prejudice. The silence in the room was deafening. The only sound was the muffled sobs of a few people. That's why, through this will, I leave 50% of all my assets, including Carter Ranch, to my son, Miguel Carter Garcia. 30% I leave to Regina Garcia, the woman who should have been my wife, and who deserves compensation for the suffering I caused her. The remaining 20% will be donated to charities that support single mothers and immigrant families. James stood up abruptly. "This is impossible. He can't do this." My lawyer continued reading. "As for my brothers, James and Richard Carter, and my mother, Margaret Carter, you have exactly 24 hours to vacate my property. All houses, apartments, and benefits you've enjoyed at my expense are revoked. Regina and Miguel are now the legal owners of Carter Ranch." Richard was visibly furious. "We'll contest this in court. This will is a fraud." The video resumed, and I smiled slightly on screen. To those thinking to contest this will, know that I have in my possession all the evidence of what you did. Payment receipts, contracts with actor Leon Castillo, bank transaction records, everything. If you try to challenge my final wishes, all this evidence will be made public, and you will face not only the loss of inheritance, but also criminal charges for document falsification and fraud. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "William, how could you do this to us? We're your family." On screen, I responded as if I could hear her. "Real family doesn't destroy lives for money. Real family doesn't separate a father from his son. You were never my family. You were just people who shared my blood and took advantage of my generosity." "Regina," I continued in the video, looking directly into the camera, "I know nothing can erase the pain I caused you and our son. I know this reparation comes too late, but I hope that one day, maybe, you can find it in your heart to forgive me. And Miguel, my son, know that your father always loved you, even when he was too blind to realize you existed." The video ended with a final message: "Justice may arrive late, but it always comes, and true love always wins over greed."
The reactions in the room were immediate and dramatic. James was furious, pounding the table and shouting about injustice. Richard tried to negotiate with the lawyer, offering deals and proposing to split the inheritance differently. My mother cried, alternating between emotional pleas and bitter accusations. "You tricked him!" Margaret yelled at Regina. "You made up this whole story to steal our money!" But Thomas Wilson, my lawyer, was prepared. He presented all the evidence I had gathered: bank records showing the payments to Leah Hurt, the contract with Leon Castillo confirming he was paid to act, and most importantly, Leah's detailed statement admitting her role in the scheme. "These documents have been verified by forensic experts," Wilson explained. "Any attempt to contest the will result in all of this being submitted to the Texas District Attorney for criminal investigation." The reality finally sunk in for my brothers. They had not only lost the inheritance, but were also facing the possibility of prison if they dared to contest my final wishes. Regina remained silent for most of the chaos, holding Miguel close. When she finally spoke, it was with the same dignity that had always defined her. "I never wanted Will's money," she said calmly. "All I wanted was for him to know his son and to know the truth. The money will be used to give Miguel the opportunities he deserves." Miguel, for his part, showed remarkable maturity for a 12-year-old. "He just wanted to know my dad," he said, "but at least now I know he loved me." In the weeks that followed, my family made a few desperate legal attempts, but every attorney they consulted came to the same conclusion. The will was legally airtight, and the evidence against them was overwhelming. Eventually, James, Richard, and my mother left Texas, relocating to other states to escape the scandal that erupted when the story leaked to the local press. Regina and Miguel moved into Carter Ranch, where she took over not only the property, but also full management of the operation. Ironically, she turned the ranch into something even greater than I had imagined, implementing sustainable practices and social programs for the workers, making Carter Ranch a national model. Miguel grew up knowing every corner of the land that should have been his from birth. By 16, he already showed the same business instincts I had developed, but with his mother's compassion and wisdom. He never held resentment for growing up without a father. Instead, he honored my memory by working to make the Carter family legacy something to be proud of. Leah Hurt used the forgiveness Regina gave her to fully redeem herself. She became an advocate for ethical practices in laboratories and occasionally visited the ranch to personally apologize to Miguel for the role she played in separating him from his father. The story of Carter Ranch became legendary in Texas, not just as a tale of business success, but as a lesson in how true love and justice can triumph over greed and prejudice. Regina established a foundation in my memory to help immigrant families settle in the United States, and Miguel plans to expand that work when he fully takes over the ranch. Sometimes on warm summer nights, Regina tells Miguel about the days we shared before the tragedy, about how shyly I courted her, our plans for the future, and the man I was when I was in love. And Miguel, now a young man of 15 with my eyes and my love for the land, listens closely, building an image of the father he lost, but whose love finally reached him. Justice came late, far too late, but it came, and in the end, true love really did triumph over greed. My family may have stolen 12 precious years from me with Regina and Miguel, but they couldn't steal the truth. And it was that truth that, even after my death, gave each person exactly what they deserved. This is my story. The story of William Carter, a man who learned too late that true family isn't the one that shares your blood, but the one that shares your heart.